Hello, welcome to Library Connection. I'm Mandi Cantrell, Youth Services Director at the B.B. Comer Memorial Library in Sylacauga, Alabama. I've chosen today to read some books from upstairs at the library in the children's department, but they are nonfiction books. They are beautiful books, and I hope you'll enjoy this one. The Fabulous Flying Machines of Alberto Santos-Dumont, and the author is Victoria Griffith. Alberto Santos-Dumont loved floating over Paris in his own personal flying machine. It had helped make him one of the most famous men in the city, if not the world. Everyone, he thought, should have this much fun running a simple errand. On a sunny afternoon in 1903, the Brazilian had taken his airship out for some shopping. Alberto flew over a sea of horse-drawn carriages. Then he spotted an automobile just ahead. Flying low enough to shout to the car's driver, Alberto cried out, "I'll race you to the park." The race was on. He pulled on a lever to speed up. The car didn't have a chance, and Alberto congratulated himself as his dirigible, a controllable balloon of his own design, glided effortlessly past the car and to the finish line. His airship was truly the best way to get around. Pulling on a cord to let air out of the balloon, Alberto began his descent. A long rope hanging down from the dirigible dragged along the street. A snapping dog ran angrily after it. The doorman of the hat shop, used to Alberto's unusual choice of transportation, rushed forward to take the rope and tie it to a post. While Alberto shopped, the doorman would make sure the airship didn't float away. A crowd gathered around, excited to see the handsome Brazilian in person. "One day you'll all have a flying machine," he called out. "Take me up with you," cried a pretty young woman from the crowd. She knew from stories in the newspapers that Alberto sometimes offered rides to complete strangers. Another time, Alberto replied regretfully, "Right now, I need a new hat. Sadly, my last one was burned beyond repair." The hydrogen gas that made the airship float had an unfortunate tendency to catch fire, and Alberto often used his hats to quench the flames. These mishaps made him a frequent customer at the hat shop. Inside, the store's attendant handed Alberto a new straw hat and listened to him talk about how flight would change the world. "I'll tell you," said Alberto, placing the hat on his head, "these machines will mean the end of all wars. Once people are able to fly to different countries, they will see how much we have in common, and we will all be friends." "I hope you are right, monsieur," said the attendant. A few minutes later, Alberto climbed back into the basket of his airship. His next stop was the fashionable Maxim's restaurant, where he would share a coffee with his friend Louis Cartier. Louis was an inventor, too, of pocket watches and jewelry. A couple of years earlier, Alberto had complained to his friend that he was unable to pull out his pocket watch during flight because his hands were so busy with the controls. Louis had promised to come up with a solution. This time, when Alberto reached the skies, the winds were blowing against him, and it slowed him down. He arrived at Maxim's a little behind schedule. "You're late," said Louis in a teasing voice as Alberto joined him, "by 5 minutes and 33 seconds to be precise." As a watchmaker, Louis was obsessed with time. "I'm sorry," Alberto apologized. He didn't want to admit that a small breeze had slowed him down. "But as you know, I can't check my pocket watch up in the air." "Yes, I know," Louis said. "I promised to find a solution to your watch problem. Well, it's taken me some time, but at last I have come up with something." And he handed Alberto a box. Alberto opened it, burning with curiosity. "It's a wristwatch," Louis explained. At parties, Alberto had seen aristocratic ladies wearing chains on their wrists with tiny watches attached. They didn't look very practical. The clock faces were too small, the chains too delicate. The watch Louis had just given him was very different. It looked sturdy with a square clock face. On the top and bottom, the watch was attached to thick leather straps. Alberto put it on and gazed at it with admiration. He was touched. "I'll put it to good use," Alberto promised. "Remember when I flew around the Eiffel Tower for that big prize? I had to do it in 29 minutes. I wasn't even sure I'd won because I couldn't check the time. Now I'll know how quickly I'm moving, and will be more important than ever. I've made a decision. It's fun hopping around Paris, but for flight to be truly useful, I need to go farther and faster." "But your dirigible has made you one of the most famous people in the world. Why take a chance on something else?" "Even the best invention can be improved," Alberto said. "You've shown me that with this new wristwatch." Alberto worked hard on his new invention for 3 years. On a chilly November morning in 1906, Louis Cartier drove eagerly in his automobile to a field just outside of Paris. Alberto had promised something new and exciting, and Louis wouldn't miss it for the world. As he drew near, Louis couldn't believe his eyes. Nearly 1,000 people were crowded onto the grass. Could Alberto's new flying machine be this important? In the middle of the field sat Alberto's invention. It looked like a funny kite, but Louis recognized it as something called an airplane. Engineers had been building them for years without being able to get them off the ground. Suddenly, Louis understood why so many people had come. They believed Alberto could succeed where so many others had failed. But Alberto's airplane was not the only one on the field. There was another, sleeker machine in the distance. Louis knew the man standing beside it. It was another Louis, Louis Blériot, who bragged that he, not Alberto, would be the first to fly a plane. "What's going on?" Louis Cartier asked someone in the crowd as he stepped out of his car. "Blériot heard Santos would try to fly today and showed up uninvited," said the man. "He says he's not going to let Santos get the credit for inventing the airplane. He's going to fly his machine too. Everyone's wondering what Santos will do." Alberto was already walking toward his rival. Would he tell Blériot to go home? Would there be a fight? The spectators were more silent than anyone would expect. Then a murmur went through the crowd. "Unbelievable!" shouted a man near Louis. "What did Santos say?" asked Louis. "He said, perhaps Monsieur would care to go first." "Well, Santos is a gentleman, I'll say that, but he'll pay a high price for it," Louis said in his breath. The man was right. This was not the moment for good manners. If Blériot succeeded to fly first, everyone would call him the inventor of the airplane. Blériot was already climbing into the cockpit. He started the engine and moved down the field, faster and faster. The machine strained and wheezed, but remained firmly on the ground. Blériot returned to the starting point to try again. Once more, he failed to take off. Alberto watched calmly, sipping a cup of coffee. On the third attempt, Blériot ran out of chances. Instead of rising in the air, his plane fell apart. Now it was Alberto's turn. Alberto started his engine. The airplane moved down the field in a burst of energy. The cheering crowd raced after it. The airplane was going fast. Would it fly or would it fall apart like Blériot's? Everyone watched as the wheels lifted just off the ground. For a moment, it seemed the airplane would come back down to earth with a thud. Instead, it pushed into the sky until it was soaring over the heads of the spectators. Higher and higher it went. Alberto turned around in the air and headed back. Now people scattered to avoid being hit by the plane, which was descending fast. It was a hard landing. One of the wings broke and a wheel twisted. It didn't matter. Alberto had become the first man to take off in a plane using its own power. The cheers were deafening. Alberto climbed down from the cockpit and was lifted on the shoulders of delirious fans. Louis pressed closer, but there were too many people around for him to get near Alberto. Then he caught his friend's eye. Alberto looked at Louis and pointed happily to his wrist. He was wearing the Cartier watch. 21 seconds, everyone was shouting. Alberto had gone fast, faster than his dirigible, fast enough to conquer the world. And he had marked the time in the air on his own wristwatch. "No one will ever forget this day," shouted a man in the crowd. Reporters rushed off to write their stories. The next morning, Alberto and his airplane would be on the front page of every newspaper in the world. Louis shook his head in wonder. He had given his friend a small present. Alberto had repaid him in the world with a far more precious gift, the gift of flight. Would it bring about the peace that Alberto dreamed of? Louis wasn't sure, but he knew the airplane would change the world forever. Yes, Louis thought, this is a day that will never be forgotten. I wanted to share with you a little bit of the author's notes in the back of the book. She says her daughter came home from school one day and she asked, "What did you learn today?" And she said, "We learned how the Wright brothers invented the airplane." Well, so the wife was very unprepared for her Brazilian husband's reaction. "That's ridiculous," he exclaimed, horrified. "Everyone knows that Alberto Santos-Dumont invented the airplane." So I would encourage you to do a little research on this. And I hope you will join us as we come back right after the commercial break.
While you're at home with family for the next few weeks, don't put off scheduling home repairs. Call Ox Foundation for a free estimate. With more time at home, you tend to notice things you haven't in the past. Mold and moisture in your basement or crawl space, uneven driveways, stair-step cracks in your exterior brick, uneven floors and doors. If your home is showing weakness, it's time to get strong. How strong? Ox Strong. Stay strong, Alabama.
We're facing unprecedented times, and prayer and positive thought are antidotes for our anxiety. Please continue your prayers for our medical profession, our leaders, our first responders, and those afflicted with this virus. My name is Mark Ledbetter, president of the Coosa Valley Ministerial Association, and I encourage you to reach out to local pastors for any spiritual or emotional needs. God will see us through these trying times.
Coosa Valley Medical Center, one of the top 10 hospitals in Alabama, is also Silicaga's largest employer. Services from the emergency room, to surgery, to cancer treatment, to post-stroke care. You won't believe what's right in your backyard. It's Coosa Valley Medical Center in Silicaga. So, if you're sick in Alabama, choose one of the top 10 hospitals in Alabama. That is Coosa Valley Medical Center.
Marble City Pharmacy in Silicaga is your destination for the highest quality health care. Our knowledgeable pharmacists are always available for questions about your medications or advice on taking over-the-counter products and supplements. Our friendly staff can assist you in choosing from our full lines of compression hose and medical equipment. And don't forget our gift department. We have a great selection of unique gifts for every occasion. Stop by and see us today. Marble City Pharmacy, here for life.
A funeral service represents a family's final farewell to their loved ones. Knowing this, we go beyond what is expected to ensure the ceremony is beautiful and memorable, a truly fitting tribute to that special life. We invite you to visit us to meet our staff and tour our renovated facility complete with a new dining area and catering services. We've been serving the people of this area for over 40 years, and we think that you'll be pleased to find that making lasting impressions remains our first priority. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Silicaga, Childersburg.
WOTM is the television provider for all Alabama High School Athletic Association championship events and special programs. WOTM is your home for the Super 7 football, state finals basketball, baseball and softball state championships, the AHSAA weekly show, and WOTM also produced the first ever football playoff show, Super 7 preview show, and reclassification reveal show. Your exclusive home for all things AHSAA is WOTM. Contact your local cable provider to request WOTM to your channel lineup.
Things a little bumpy in your driveway? Ox Foundation Solutions has the expertise and the know-how to repair cracks, wet basements and crawl spaces, and uneven floors in your home. Ox Foundation Solutions will come up with the right fix for you. It's time to get strong. How strong? Ox Strong. Get a free estimate from Ox Foundations.
Welcome back. The next book I've chosen is called Sparrow Girl by Sara Pennypacker, and it's about another event in history that you might not have heard about. One day, not too long ago, war was declared in China. Sparrows are our enemies. They eat too much grain. We must drive them from the land. Older brother held out the bag of firecrackers that father had given him to help fight the war. I like sparrows, Ming Li said quietly. Walking home with older brother, she looked up and tried to imagine the sky empty, silent. Mother and father were talking about the plan too. The village barn is empty now. Next year it will be full of grain. I could help you plant more seeds in the spring, Father, Ming Li said, and weed the fields, and you are not a farmer, Father patted her head. You are only a small girl. That night, Ming Li couldn't sleep. Something bothered her, scratching at her thoughts like a monkey. She crept to older brother's sleeping mat. How will the other birds know? She whispered, shaking his shoulder. Older brother rubbed his eyes and scowled in the moonlight. Won't our noise parade frighten the other birds too? What if the nightingales fly away? Or the swallows? Or pigeon? Younger sister, your brain is as small as a sparrow's, hissed older brother. Our leader's plans are always perfect. They told us at school. Now go to sleep. The next morning, a tremendous din woke Ming Li. She ran to the window. A sea of people flooded the village, clanging gongs, crashing cymbals, beating drums, and shouting in their loudest voices. Firecrackers exploded like gunshots. Dress warmly, Mother said, handing her a rice cake. You will be gone all day and into the evening. Ming Li and older brother picked up their pots and spoons and went outside. The villagers were running through the streets, making so much noise the ground itself rumbled. They were looking up to search for enemy sparrows, but not down to see if they might trample a small girl. Ming Li clutched older brother's hand. He led her away from the thundering crowd and into the orchard. Older brother stopped under a grove of apricot trees and lit a firecracker. Boom! A cloud of sparrows rose and flew across to a row of pear trees. He followed and lit another firecracker beneath them. Ming Li clapped her hands over her ears and squeezed her eyes shut. But the firecrackers' loud golden sparks were exploding inside her head now. She wanted to fly away like a sparrow to someplace high and safe. Ming Li set out for the road, but just as she reached it, she saw something fall from the sky like a stone. A group of villagers saw it too and hurried over. It's been frightened to death, Ming Li cried. We have to stop. Dead sparrows don't eat grain, crowed an old man beside her. More birds fell to the ground, lifeless. Aye, aye, we're winning the sparrow war, cheered the others. Ming Li ran home. She climbed to the peak of the roof to check on Pigeon, but his cage was empty. Older brother must have sent his pet out yesterday. Suddenly a plump silver bird flew toward her. You've come home! Ming Li held out her arm for Pigeon to land on, but he only fluttered in the air for a moment and then fell with a soft thud on the curved clay tiles. Pigeon lay limp and still except for his heart pounding beneath the pearly feathers of his breast. And then even that was still. Tears filled Mingley's eyes. She tucked the bird into her jacket, climbed down from the roof, and set out for the orchards. Older brother was standing beneath a walnut tree, preparing to set off a firecracker. Mingley touched his elbow. Wait. Older brother's face crumpled and his shoulders fell. He dropped his firecracker. Together they buried Pigeon under the walnut tree. The noise parade will kill all the sparrows in China, maybe all the birds. We have to do something, Mingley said. Will you help me? Older brother nodded, his eyes red. But no one can disobey our leader. What can we do? Maybe some of the sparrows that fall to the ground are still alive, like Pigeon was. We could rescue them. All that afternoon, whenever she saw a bird fall, Mingley hurried to the spot. Time after time, she was too late. But then, just as the lanterns were being lit, a small brown bird dropped beside a quince bush, then fluttered up for a moment. Mingley's hope rose with it. She ran to the bush and found a sparrow struggling to its feet. She scooped the exhausted bird into her jacket. You're safe now, little friend, she whispered. Around her, people were walking home, congratulating one another. In 2 more days, there won't be a single sparrow left in all of China. Mingley wrapped her jacket more closely around her. She could feel the bird's tiny heart beating against her own. Yes, there will, she promised. She found older brother in the crowd. Just one, she told him, letting him peek inside. Together they brought the little sparrow to Pigeon's empty cage. Mingley filled the water cup and broke her rice cake into bits. The next morning, she and older brother hurried out to search for birds to save. If any villagers were nearby when Mingley ran to a fallen sparrow, older brother distracted them. Look, to the west, a flock of enemies. By afternoon, the birds were falling from the sky at a terrible rate. They're like raindrops, said older brother. The sky is raining birds. No, said Mingley, they're like teardrops. The sky is crying birds. By nightfall, they had rescued 4 more sparrows. On the 3rd day, the sky was nearly empty. Still, the villagers poured through the streets, clanging gongs, clashing cymbals, beating drums, and shouting in their loudest voices. Mingley and older brother found only 2 more birds alive. 7 sparrows, said Mingley later, looking into the cage on the rooftop, when there used to be thousands. 7 sparrows, said older brother, when there could have been none. That night, Mingley lay awake. Her sparrows would need room to fly soon, but if she let them loose, the villagers would hunt them. The next morning, she arose before dawn. She hurried to the rooftop, climbed down with the cage, and ran with it through the fields to the village barn. She released the birds inside. Someday you'll fly under the sun again, she promised them. Each day after school, Mingley visited her sparrows. She watched them fly between the rafters, then swoop down to peck at worms and bugs. But when spring came, Mingley worried. As soon as the first crop was harvested, the farmers would open up the barn. Where could she hide her sparrows then? Already father and older brother had been planting. Mingley ached to go with them. Let me help you, she begged each day. You are not a farmer, her father smiled. You are only a small girl. One day in midsummer, Mingley noticed her father looked worried when he came back from the fields. There's to be a meeting of all the farmers tomorrow, he said, in front of the village barn. The village barn. What if they went inside? The next morning, Mingley followed her father. She hid beside the barn. The farmers sat in a circle, and their faces serious. I will have no grain this year, said one. The locusts are eating it all. The plums in my orchard are full of worms, cried another. Weevils are eating my rice, added a third, and grasshoppers are chewing through the beanstalks. There will be famine, said Mingley's father. Our families will starve. And then there was silence while the truth sailed over them, cold and dark as a winter night. Mingley couldn't help herself. She ran out from beside the barn. It's because there are no sparrows. There are no sparrows to eat the insects now. "Mingli, go home," cried her father, but the eldest farmer held up his hand. "She is right," he said. "The sparrows were never our enemies." "What does it matter?" asked the second farmer. "What's done is done." Mingli whispered something in her father's ear, and he stood up. "Show us." Mingli led the farmers to the barn and threw open the doors. She held her breath. How great would her punishment be? Inside, the sparrows rose from the rafters and flew out into the fresh summer air. The farmers gasped in wonder. "Your daughter brings us a miracle," they cried. "She brings us 7 miracles. From this day, sparrows will be safe in our village, and we will tell everyone we meet from other villages about the wisdom of the sparrow girl." "Yes," agreed Mingli's father. "My daughter is the sparrow girl, but she is something more." He lifted her to his shoulder. Mingli is a true farmer. After I read this story, I was fascinated. I had never learned this in history, but I wanted to read a little bit of the author's notes at the end. Like I said, the author is Sara Pennypacker. The Sparrow War. In 1958, Chairman Mao Zedong declared war on sparrows, blaming them for eating too much of China's wheat crop. His battle plan was simple. Over a period of 3 days and evenings, all the able-bodied citizens in the country, including the school children, were to cover the land and make as much noise as possible so that the birds would die of exhaustion or heart attacks. The plan was effective, and within 3 days, the sparrow population was decimated, but deadly to humans. Without the sparrows, the locust population grew to plague proportions, contributing to a famine that killed between 30 and 40 million Chinese over the next 3 years. I hope you enjoyed that story, Sara Pennypacker's book, Sparrow Girl. I also want you to please check our Facebook page. We post on there regularly with updates of our services. Right now, the hallway by the auditorium is open for faxing, copying, using computers. We also have some books down the hall for you to browse through, but if there's a particular book you would like, please call us, 256-249-0961. We'll be glad to pull it for you, or come in and tell us what kind of books you're looking for. We'll be glad to pull them for you and let you check them out. Thank you so much for joining me today, and like I said, please keep checking our Facebook page for any changes. Thank you for joining me on Library Connection.